Everyone always reminds us to talk to the people in your community, to do the onboarding calls, the interviews, the survey. Don't lose sight of what your end users needs. And I find product management approaches, good product management, good product strategy helps always anchor me in that. So then also when it comes to aligning stakeholders, getting people on board, why do we have that feature? What's the value of it? What are we doing with that? Using some ways to document a product like a product canvas is we're going to do this. The alternative is doing this. Our option is better than the alternative because we have X, Y, and Z, which is value for our business. And here's how we get people to adopt it. It gives you a framework in a language with which to talk to your colleagues, to explain the why behind something.
Hey everyone, I'm Joel Premack, host of the Community-Led Growth Show. Today I'm joined by Danny Pancratz, Director of Community at Unqork. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Danny.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's start off with our conversation with a super easy question. Would you please give everyone a quick 30-second intro about yourself?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Community at Unqork. If you haven't heard of Unqork, we're a tech startup that's 5 years old, building the next generation development platform So what that means is Unqork's a completely visual, codeless platform that allows enterprises to build complex custom software faster and with higher quality and lower cost than a traditional traditional approaches, all without writing a single line of code. So the short takeaway from that is a no-code or codeless development platform. Our customers are enterprises, so we're B2B, but oftentimes the apps they're building are B2B or B2C, or also for internal use cases. At Unqork, I'm a one-person team, but as community builders listening to this know that regardless of the size of your community team, it's not ever something you do alone. You work with your colleagues, especially in B2B space. So I have great support from colleagues on our enablement side, support, product technical success, our solution architects from our professional services teams, marketing, et cetera. Pretty much community, everyone at Unqork, our employees use it as well, is involved in helping out, contributing expertise. And then of course, our creators, customers, partners of ours as well. Before that, I have more than 10 years of experience working in communities, and a little bit unique at companies where I like to say community was our product. I worked for two independent software communities. One, an SAP user group. There's a number of them all over the world, but the North America one, ASUG, America's SAP user group, is the largest in the world. Companies bought membership to that community. That's how community was our product. And then we started a Google Cloud customer community, that same approach, independent from Google Cloud, but with great support, both of those from SAP and Google Cloud. So I've led conferences of 20,000 plus and 800 sessions, tons of webinars, micro conferences, I like to say, or meetups, events and things like that, and been involved in a lot of different parts of, community as a product. And also, now at Unqork, community for our customers working from within the software provider itself, which is really cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And now we're just going to dive right into it. So with that, you just mentioned that you've been around the block in the community space just a little bit. And so with that, I'm really curious, what are the goals of Unqork's community?
Yeah, well, the cool thing is, they were looking for somebody to lead their community efforts. They already had a community, or we already had a community when I was hired. And where it came from is feedback from our customers, from our creators and our staff, that there was a better way to do what we were doing. We had established a Q&A forum on a popular site for hosting Q&A, but then we had all these other resources from our enablement team, training through our academy, documentation. We were doing webinars and putting out a lot of content and best practices. And our community said, there's all these great things, but I have more than, 10 things or a dozen things bookmarked, right? And I don't know always where to go find what. And then also we were creating community, right? Q&A itself and some of the webinars were creating connections, and people were excited to share their insights and their expertise, what they were learning. So that brings it together in terms of like our mission for the Unqork community is to empower all of our creators. And a creator is kind of a developer persona. It's anybody who's, building applications on the Unqork platform. So you see solution architects, application engineers, things like that, developers. But because we're completely visual and no code, you see some other personas, business user types getting hands-on as well. So to empower them through connections to people and resources. So the people part, it's community. People's the most important part of community, but we're bringing together all of those resources into one place, and then kind of like the integration and intersection of all of those resources, all of those people. And our vision, kind of future state of what we would like our community to be, is the fully integrated and self-sustaining Unqork community that unlocks the full potential of each community member. It's about helping people be better at their jobs, right? And right now we're really focused on that creator persona, but there's other stakeholders, other people involved with our customers and partners, and we want to over time grow and expand that. And I've seen it with my last jobs, how much community can help people advance in their career of all different personas. So really excited about what we're doing and where we're going.
Amazing. And I guess, are there a couple like specific ways that you're building it out intentionally, whether it's like engagement or advocacy programs,
Sure,
or anything else like that you're just doing? And like, how are you, I guess what I'm really trying to get at is like, how are you cultivating it outside beyond like holding a space for it?
yeah. Well, so I learned that I think Salesforce popularized, but a lot of companies use something called like a V2 MOM strategy template: vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. And there's a lot of similar types of those for people who have taken the CMX community MBA. They talk about a number of those. So I talked about the vision, right? The North Star of where we're going, the mission of what our day-to-day work is, connections to people and resources. The methods on kind of that strategy template or our work streams, we're really looking at three things. We're looking at adoption, engagement, and advocacy. And if we do those three things right, then other kind of business outcomes, the ability to scale our operations is going to come with that, right? And if we do adoption, engagement, and advocacy right, we're going to be able to retain happy customers and partners who are working with us, and it's also going to help us grow. So those are some other things, but in order to get that opportunity to scale, to retain, and to grow, we want to focus on people adopting, and that's adopting the Unqork platform itself, but also our community hub, which is how we bring all of those resources I mentioned together into a one-stop shop. I like to call it a customer success or creator success launchpad. And then engagement is, as community professionals know, all of the things: Q&A, ideation or product feedback, getting ways for people to share their insights. For us, that's use cases, but talking about best practices, tips and tricks, and things like that. Our events, our webinars, and other events, we do something called Success Hour. We have some hackathons, things like that. And then also accessing some of those learning resources on demand, watching videos, reading content. And then, as you've engaged people, kind of the top of the engagement pyramid is advocacy, the people who are your champions. And so we have a super user program right now called Subject Matter Experts, with people who contribute the most. And we also have another kind of advocacy program about telling user stories, our Power User Spotlights. So doing a little bit of each, right? So adopting Unqork, adopting the Community Hub, which is our launchpad and central home for all things community, robust engagement, and then giving the opportunity for our biggest fans, our most engaged people, to be our advocates as well.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because that's pretty much like the perfect, in my opinion, like way to think about it. There are like, you need the adoption metrics, but then you also need like the engagement, because that's really where people are going to like meet their peers. And that's where you're going to get those like one-to-one connections. You're going to get those like recommendations on best practices that someone else maybe hasn't thought of, or it's not written down somewhere, but like somebody who's been there, done that knows.
Right. Yeah, and when it comes to measuring success too, that's where I like to, you could drill down adoption, engagement, and advocacy into more specific parts, and it's really valuable to do that. And we'll do that for some metrics, right? Your Q&A versus your event attendance versus ideation, and it's good to look at all of those three things. But really, from kind of like a user journey standpoint, right? Is the adoption is how do I get started, right? And then the engagement is going to be for the people who have adopted and they're rolling up their sleeves, they're getting to work and they want to improve the way they do things on a regular basis. And then as the community and for us, for our platform at Unqork helps them find success, giving those people the opportunity to tell their story, to tell Unqork's story for others. And in doing that, inspire others, help us grow, things like that. Because when you're successful, you want to tell people about it. That's how we are as human beings, and that's why community is important and sharing that. And for helping people with their careers, that's the type of thing too, right? That if somebody becomes a Unqork expert, contributes a lot through the community, not only for our business outcomes of like reaching new customers, retaining people, is I want to help that person out as well, and celebrating that as them as a subject matter experts, an opportunity to highlight their contributions, highlight their expertise, and oftentimes that means more sponsorship within their current company or opportunities to grow within their current companies, or other companies who are looking for experts saying, hey, that's somebody we should really check out, right? Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear that you agree this is a good way to look at it.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And I think just as almost like one other point of what you were just touching on is like the ways in which it can benefit someone in terms of their like long-term career is also being in a community and be active and being recognized through an advocacy program can often also help them just start building their personal brand, whether it's through participating in content, speaking at, whether it's community events, more external facing events, etc. I'm a big fan of it. And I think it's just something that when people get the opportunity, sometimes it's nothing that they would really have sought out. But when you offer it to people, people are often very appreciative of it and really jump at it. So,
yeah, that's one of my favorite things about community, right? And that's why in our vision, our future state is like unlocking the full potential. With the communities I worked with before Unqork, and I'm seeing this at Unqork as well, SAP's been around for decades. Google Cloud is, a major player in, cloud infrastructure and so many other cool solutions. And you're seeing people make a career out of this kind of niche technology. And niche communities, whether you're B2B or B2C, when you have that type of experts, we have the opportunity to celebrate that expertise and give people status, give people recognition in a way that's going to help them grow. Because I think a lot of companies like Unqork or mine, if you're creating a community, you care about your customers, you care about your partners, and you want them to succeed just as much as you want your business to succeed, because those things come hand in hand. And growing companies create these kind of career arcs, right? It's not just like, well, we do this really well. People now have careers because of their Salesforce expertise, or you name it, right? And these kind of very specific communities allow you to really stand out and celebrate your success, and really be somebody, which is great.
I really 1,000% agree. And I would even just say, like, from being on the podcast, like from hosting a podcast, I've had the wonderful pleasure having people on who'd be like, oh, like I always wanted to like be on a guest on a podcast, but I didn't think it would happen for 5 years or whatever. And I'm like, well, I just made you searchable on Spotify. Here's a video of me typing in your name on Spotify and sending it to you. Like,
yeah, that's happening with me right now. I'm a big podcast fan. I always thought it would be cool to be on podcasts, and it's nice to see as the community industry evolves and this movement happen, companies becoming community led or targeting growth and success through their communities. podcasts like this and other avenues give people like me an opportunity to talk about our jobs, which when you introduce yourself to people at a dinner party, they don't necessarily know what it means to like run a community program, right? And, community can be, as a previous manager of mine used to say, like a fuzzy word because it can mean so many different things to so many people. But whether you're working in community outreach or you're doing a community for like a B2B company like me, it's about bringing people together and helping people be successful.
I would 1,000% agree. Or similarly to you and your experience and at ASOG and the Google Cloud community, I too also worked at a community that was like a pure community of that was the product. So trust me, I've been at some of those dinner parties or when you're trying to explain it to your family and you're like, so what exactly do you do? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's a great question for another day.
You do
I'll
events,
get
right?
back to you.
Yeah, events and so much more, right? And it's really about the why of the event, which is
Yeah,
as humans, I think I've heard a number of your other guests refer to this. It's just who we are and, to help each other out and to share our expertise and social creatures who support each other. So I like the nice thing about the community industry is events are a huge part of them, but we're focused on the why, which is people coming together for a common goal and to help each other.
exactly. Well, now that we've just covered so much, which is amazing, I'm really curious now. We talked a little bit earlier in the conversation about your goals for Unqork's community. Now I'm curious, how do you measure against them? Because this is one of my favorite things, because this is not a science in the community space. It's a little art, it's a little science. Everybody has their own take. I want to hear yours.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, right? And is becoming increasingly important given, market trends and economic conditions, right? I'm in the tech space, which has had a rough couple of quarters. Companies are right sizing or just, focused on, are we spending money in the right area? And so return on investment and value of your community is always something you're going to be talking about, but is especially important right now. So I talked about adoption, engagement, and advocacy, and really the user journey of I'm getting started, I'm getting to work, I have expertise, help me tell some people about it, help me give back. That's from kind of the customer or the user point of view. For measurements, then you got to focus on those business outcomes, right? You got to focus on how is community helping us scale, right? How is it helping us make more efficient, save costs, things like that. If we're targeting retention and winning new customers, what are ways you can measure that engagement to prove that value? So we look at it a little bit differently. In addition to what I'll talk through in terms of our engagement pyramid, I also like to anchor like an engagement pyramid of moving people up your engagement pyramid with what I call experience indicators. And those are the things that are going to be kind of quality control benchmarks of when they visit the community or participate in an event, what's their experience like? And maybe you use a CSAT, customer satisfaction, for that. But for us, looking at how often, what are the rates people are visiting at, what's our reply rate and our answer rate like, and the median time for somebody to get a reply or an answer, that will help us make sure that we're not kind of losing the forest for the trees, looking at some of these engagement things and make sure that we're delivering a positive experience. Because one thing about communities and one thing about people is if it's not a positive experience over time, we're going to look for another community. We're going to look for a different place to go. And so balancing that in terms of also like, all right, how do we engage people more? How do we turn our engaged users into our advocates? How do we onboard people for that adoption thing? So our pyramid starts with your visitor, right? You're looking at it. And then we have something called a registered visitor. So the community hub, our one-stop shop creator launch pad, is where we do everything, right? We might take that in person, right? Offline and in person to an event, or we might have webinars, but kind of our system of record or the connective tissue of our community, our hub is our community hub. So do you have a profile with that that's going to allow you to register for events, that's going to allow you full access to those resources? And then we look at it from a product mindset, right? So if you hear earnings reports for whether it's Netflix or Facebook or Meta and things like that. They're talking about daily active users, monthly active users, or whatever time frame. So we look at an active user. Something that I'm really proud of is, so active users we look at, it's really good, but oftentimes the measurement for active user was active one time for one moment within the time period. There's a little bit of noise in that from my point of view, because when you sign up, you're active for the day, but maybe you don't come back. And so the next level up from active user on our community metrics is what I call a recurring user. And we're looking, did you come back to the community on 3 days within the month, right? Or within the quarter or whatever. And if you're doing that, to me, that's a stronger signal than I was active one day. I came back on 3 separate days, not 3 times in the same hour, 3 separate days, looking for resources, looking for people to connect with, conversations to have. And that's really an indicator to me of like, is that growing? Because otherwise, there's going to be noise. How many new people signed up this month, right? And there's a number of factors that can kind of skew my active user metric. So recurring users is really my sweet spot. Then once some people have adopted, right, that's where really we're talking about adoption. We're moving into engagement. Are they contributing? Are they, sharing their expertise, asking a question, answering, getting involved in the conversations? Being a lurker or somebody just kind of using the community is great too. But as people cultivate expertise and get comfortable in the community, are they contributing? For online communities, right, whether you're a Slack community or using like a community platform, I like to count our contributing users who take those actions that help out me and the community, right? Are you liking a post? Are you voting for an idea? Are you marking whether or not that resource was helpful? Because if you're doing that, you're sending a signal. You are contributing to the community of this is good or this is bad if you have the option to downvote stuff. And that's a good way to also see engagement, right? So people are active, maybe they're not posting, but if they're liking things that have questions, the answers that are helpful, they're giving back, because then you can take that data, you can make it into a top 10 list of questions on a certain theme, right? Or here's what's trending, and it's going to power some of the parts of your platform. So then contributing users we're almost to the top of our engagement pyramid now. And then you get into your advocacy programs. For us, that's our subject matter expert program. We're looking at other ways, but you can also count people who contribute above and beyond, present on a webinar, or help plan your meetup, or whatever it is you do that takes the most time and effort, or is telling your story, being an advocate for the community or for the company. That's the top of our pyramid there. So we want to see people move on up, see all of those numbers grow, and while maintaining a positive experience as well. Lastly, is looking at some other ways to kind of benchmark that, right? So your net promoter score, or NPS, as I mentioned, your CSAT. And a cool thing, and you mentioned, Joel, that like this, how do you measure and show value for community, is something we've been talking about in the community industry, but it's really important. And we're still trying to, I think we're making progress and we're getting there, is right. So taking these metrics, right, whatever your funnel looks like or your pyramid looks like, and then putting them against, all right, how do you measure a healthy customer or a happy customer, and looking for correlations, looking for other things. And for us, we find customers that have community members who are actively engaged and contributing tend to be happier, right? So that's a good way to kind of prove your business case, right? Or to prove your hypothesis. Community helps, right? Then there are things like, if you have a strong support use case with Q&A like we do, or things like that, or product ideation, or whatever your business goals are, then you can look at, okay, did we help those? Did we enable self-service that reduced support tickets, things like that? Did we get some great ideas that helped us really expedite a feature we didn't know was important to our users, whatever it may be? So there's a number of ways. I don't think it's cookie cutter for anyone, but I think you need to look at the user journey. Are they engaging more? Because if they're not, that's going to be a signal that maybe you need to talk to your users, do some research, do some roundtables. And if all those numbers are going up, then you can correlate those to the specific business outcomes you're chasing as well.
First off, I love everything that you just said. I was just nodding along and be like, yes, yes, yes. I subscribe to this. Okay, keep going, please. Thank you. That was amazing. Um, Something that I just like wanted to call out that I love that you just kind of hit on. You mentioned the lurkers earlier at the top of that like last section, really, or like conversation point that you just spoke about. And something else you hit on was about how there are these almost like they are engagement activities, but they're not actively like sharing or asking questions. But in terms
Yeah.
of like upvoting or downvoting or reacting with an emoji if you're in a Slack community, etc.,
Hmm.
I think that all of those are also like they allow members to meet like where they are. Maybe they're not
Right.
comfortable
A
sharing,
hundred
but they
percent. Yeah.
are comfortable like clicking a button and being like, yes, this is a good
Yeah.
answer because
I'm
it
new
helps
here,
me
right?
sub.
I'm new. I don't have the expertise, but I was looking for something and this helped me. Taking the time to add the emoji, to give it a like or an upvote or whatever it is, that is a sign of life, a sign of satisfaction, a sign of happiness. And yeah, not only I love what you said about meeting people where they are and allowing them there to engage as they'd like, but also for us, you know, the person who answered that question, right? And if you have a gamification system, which we do, right? We have every time your answer gets a like, you earn points and things like that. Then they're giving back to their peer. It's positive reinforcement. Thank you, Joel, for that answer. Uh, it helped me. And this might be months later or a year later, depending on how old your community is. But taking the time to add that is super valuable, and maybe we're not going to report month over month on 10,000 likes versus 6,000 or whatever like that. That's why I'm looking at it from the user journey perspective of who do I have that is engaged, right, and contributing and giving back either positive reinforcement to their fellow community members and or data that when I'm talking to our product team say people, these are the top voted ideas, right? I can't have that conversation without people taking the time to go, upvote or like things like that.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to call that out because I thought it was really cool how you called that out as like you may have lurkers, but they can still help you by
Yeah.
not necessarily sharing words in the space, but just through small actions.
Hmm.
Um, so surprise, surprise, I do a little bit of prep for our conversation, just a little bit from time to time. I've
Okay.
been known to do this. And I was checking out your LinkedIn profile, saw that as one of your key accomplishments, you called out being a product manager essentially for your community hub at Unqork. It's built on Unsighted. So I would just be curious as a fellow community professional and for all of our listeners to learn more about like what you mean by a product manager of a community hub.
Yeah, so practically that means I manage all aspects of our online community, our community hub. How it works, new feature development, user experience, operations, things like that. But product management has become my core view of my approach to community, because and a little bit of that's my unique background, right? I worked for a couple companies where community was our product. We were selling memberships to an association or an organization, or we were bringing together a community and then finding other ways to monetize outside of that. And through doing that, I took a really valuable product strategy course through Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business and learned a lot of product management terminology and techniques and approach, that V2MOM strategy template that I mentioned earlier. And what I really learned is we as community professionals are doing this type of things, but we're talking about it in other ways. And the most important thing I learned from that product strategy course, Joel, was that good products solve problems for people. And so I reflected back on everything that I had done when I was running more community programs, when I was running more events and things like that. And all of those things if you're not solving a problem for someone or, helping them accomplish a goal, you're going to fail at that, right? No, you're not, people aren't going to register for your event if they don't see how it helps them, right? Their goal might be to just learn a new skill or to get the information. So that value proposition, making it clear, helped me look at events more specifically, or look at community programs and advocacy programs or volunteer or super user programs. Like, well, why is somebody going to help out and give back here, right? Why are they doing this? And help me understand, oh, it's going to be good for their career, right? Or they learn by doing, or whatever it might be. So the jobs to be done framework in product management and product strategy is, what does somebody need to do, or what are they trying to accomplish? And how does your product, whether it's an event or an online community or a feature on your online community, is really helpful for me to focus on the needs of our community members, the end user. And you hear that a lot, right? When you're hearing community best practices, everyone always reminds us to talk to the people in your community, to do the onboarding calls, the interviews, the survey. Don't lose sight of what your end users needs. And I find product management approaches, good product management, and good product strategy helps always anchor me in that. So then also when it comes to aligning stakeholders, getting people on board, why do we have that feature? What's the value of it? What are we doing with that? Using some ways to document a product like a product canvas is, we're going to do this. The alternative is doing this. Our option is better than the alternative because we have X, Y, and Z, which is value for our business. And here's how we get people to adopt it. It gives you a framework in a language with which to talk to your colleagues, to explain the why behind something, right? So you're focusing on the why for your end user, as well as like the value of that feature. And it's also really great homework for you to do when you have a really good idea and you're like, okay, let's do that idea, right? And, on a recent episode, with Nisha from Gong, I think she mentioned the importance of trying things, right? Which I really agree with, and allowing yourself to fail and moving on. But do your homework first, right? I like to kind of pressure test. Why did I fail? Was there value for this new feature? Was there value for this event or conversation and things like that? And then you can do it. And if your homework is lined up, then okay, our community's not interested in it. This isn't someplace people are looking to engage. But if you can't say what's in it for them, or what's in it for the business, or how your option is better than the alternative, it says, well, maybe invest that time and energy someplace else. So ultimately, the reason it's in my LinkedIn like that is I'd like to take a product manager's approach to everything that I'm doing in community, because it anchors me to how is it helping the end user, which is our community members, and gives me that framework to align stakeholders and to talk to our talk to management, get that buy-in, prove your return on investments. And that engagement pyramid I talked through earlier is all like a product management type of thing, right? Active users, contributing users, things like that. That's, people who run products, whether it's Netflix or Facebook or whatever, that's the stuff that they're reporting on. And we can do the same thing in our communities as well.
Awesome. That's amazing. And I think it's really cool to hear you talking about it similarly to a product, because then, as you said, it just makes you always connect everything you do back to your members. So it's always about like a member experience. It's not just like, oh, do people find value generally in the community, but it's like each thing in it. Can we do A/B testing to always like make the adoption easier and therefore make it that much more valuable for people?
Right. And if I were to imagine what might kind of turn somebody off to that approach, is it can feel too scientific or not focused enough on the people, right? Community is about the people. But with community, there's always this chicken or the egg thing. You need the people there to have the community and to get all of the good benefits. And so I find if I think Nisha also talked, one of my favorite things about the idea of the host of the party, right? If you have a really good product, whether that's an online community platform or a conference or an event or a meetup thing or just a networking thing, if that's a great experience and a really cool product, people are going to come back again. to use it or go to the next event. And all of the others, the special magical part of community, people helping each other, relationships being formed, conversations happening offline, off platform, in the margins, people getting to know each other, getting each other jobs, mentoring each other, things that you're not ever going to be able to really measure and prove to your chief stakeholder, like, I got somebody a better job, and cultivated mentorships and things like that. All of that stuff doesn't happen if you don't create the environment for it. So if you think about it from a good product management, user experience, product experience mindset, you are being a good party host, and the music's right, the lighting's right. There's places for people to sit or like mingle and things like that, to use that analogy. And so if you have a good product, the users are there, the people are there, and then you let who we are as people who love to connect and collaborate and help each other take over, and the magic stuff happens, right? And then you hear the story of, some communities where people might, find their partner, right, and get married and have children from that, or find a mentor, or like hire somebody for a job, right, and things like that. Those are the stories that, put wind in our sails as community managers on a regular basis, that happen in the margins. You're not going to be able to measure, but that doesn't happen if it's not a good place for people to gather and to connect.
1,000% agree. And at your party, you also always need the food, the drinks, and the music.
Yes. So. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I love that analogy, and thank you so much for calling that out, because I think it really makes it like, it's just more realistic for everybody, and take something that can feel very, I'll say, like abstract in a manner, like an approach to something. And now you just made it very concrete. So thank you very much. From your background, from your time being in this kind of product management mindset of a community hub, what's something that you either like learned the hard way or nailed it on the first try, and which, congratulations if you did so, that you would share or give a recommendation to, or best practice advice on, if you're going to be integrating a handful of apps or other resources into your community hub?
Yeah. For me, I mentioned that product management point of view is just how I really found a way to kind of really look at things. But the latest thing, or the biggest lesson learned recently, is learn the basics of automation tools and APIs, or to zoom out one click, is don't be intimidated by a technical skill that you don't have today, or any type of skill that you don't have. Because the great thing about communities is people are there to help you learn. And so asking the people that you're working with, or your colleagues who are partnering with you on that. And so for me, over the last year plus, part of it is I work for Unqork, and we have an application development platform, and it's no code. So it's easy for people like me who have arts backgrounds to learn that thing. But I find in the community industry, a lot of us come in here we're people, right? We like collaborating. We like working on teams. I mentioned an arts background. I have 2 collegiate degrees. None of them are in community, right? I don't know if there are community degrees yet, but they're not in business. They're not in tech. They're in theater. I thought I wanted to be a high school theater teacher, then a college theater teacher. And I have a MFA in acting. And I found a home in community, because when you're working on a play or you're involved in the arts, that's oftentimes like the group of people, all these communities that pop up all the time. But you're working in teams, you're working on events, you're putting things together, you're collaborating, you're learning new skills. There's people of different experience levels. And I really saw a lot of the things that I valued about my arts background in the work I was doing, working for other communities. But then I'm working with tech communities, right? SAP, then Google Cloud. I'm not a developer. I don't have any of that past things. I haven't ever built an app, or hadn't before I joined Unqork. And it's really easy for your eyes to glaze over and to be like, well, I don't understand that, right? If you do that, you're putting a low ceiling on your potential as a community manager and as a person. And I like to, for technical concepts, equate it to Shakespeare, given my acting background. Shakespeare intimidates a lot of people. a lot of the words are, archaic. You don't know the meaning. They're not popping up in everyday conversation. But if you take the time to look it up in a dictionary or Google it, read a Wikipedia article or things like that, if you can get a high level understanding of it, then all of a sudden that acronym, that term, it is now within your language and you can understand that because normally the word is telling you what it's doing, what it means with technical skills. So APIs were one of the things that I was intimidated by, right? And I kind of got this macro understanding. And I thought I was a pretty technically savvy business user by the time I left my last job. But if it ever came to something with the API, I just had to, hope that my IT team would have the time and opportunity to figure that thing out. But now I've learned with, more friendly automation tools, ours at Unqork being one for parts of it. We work great with APIs, but things like a Zapier or a Zapier, I'm not sure how it's actually pronounced, but, I think there are other companies out there. There's very user-friendly opportunities for you to understand cause and effect. And with working with Inside It, as you mentioned, that's the engine of our community platform. Was able to really customize my experience and scale operations when I've been a team of one, team of two, involve others in my organization and bring the community to them. If we had more time, we could talk about how do you get your colleagues to engage in the community. But from my point of view, is if you can bring the community to them, to your earlier point about meet people where they are, there's something I'm working on right now is as questions come in from the community, instead of a feed of every question, how do I bring a feed of questions by specific tags just to people, right? And I'm able to do that using some skills that I've learned by asking questions, leaning on mentors and peers, and letting myself kind of develop a new technical skill. And the reason beyond leveling up as a person, right, and developing new skills is if you can automate things. I've heard a lot of presentations in my exposure to the tech industry. Automation can be a scary thing in the impact it has on the future of work. But really, the value of automation is in moving human tasks to higher value tasks. And if you look at that from a community lens, that's the time because you have more, efficient and effective moderation and alert to be like, hey, this post you might want to take a look at, right? If you know about that with a Slack alert right away, or if you have a Slack community, if there are workflows and things you can set up to make things easier, then you have that time back to talk to people, to form relationships, to engage with a super user and turn them into an advocate, somebody to partner with you on that. Or it gives you time to take a look at that idea, to try that new thing. And so not being afraid of technical things and rolling up your sleeves and self-service automation is really interesting, can be fun, and it can open you up for a lot of like higher value tasks that you might feel drowning in your operations on a day-to-day without it.
I love it, and I am Team Zapier. So someone from
that's what I say
there,
too.
someone's from there has to correct me, or else I'm just gonna continue to say Zapier. So I'll be waiting and looking out for it in the comments when we share this on social from them. But I really enjoyed hearing about that. And I think that was really interesting because it's also something that, like, me personally, I've become more comfortable to starting off similarly with like a Zapier. I'm like getting a little bit more curious into like different things, different platforms, integrations. So it definitely helps. And like it also, I think, opens up your possibilities and your potential so much more when you can connect things in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And I would argue too, I think everybody has the opportunity. All of us, if that ROI conversation, that community metric, I didn't really do a lot of Excel stuff in my theater training, but then I had to learn Excel formulas and different ways to report and things like that. And if you can figure out Excel formulas and things like that, you can learn a Zapier or another automation tool of like, this thing triggers that, and then we're going to filter it that way, and then we're going to take that action. And then all of a sudden you're spending 15 minutes building something that's saving you hours each month, right? And so the potential's there. It's scary at first. Looking at API documentation, it was some of the most intimidating experiences I've had over the last year and a half. But but a little window in and connecting with somebody who can help you out, you can kind of peel back that onion and figure things out.
For sure. And I would equally say you should also like test it too. That's one of the beauties
Mm.
too of like you don't have to launch something before it's tested when it's done that way. Typically, if it's done especially through like a Zapier, usually you can do a quick test run and feel like, yep, everything checks out. Feel better.
Right. Well, actually, yeah. And some of my most creative automation solutions came in testing, right? Oh, like a happy accident. I tested it, and oh, that alert worked differently, or it pulled in the wrong field by accident. It's like, oh, I have that field. What can I do with that field, right? Now I can do it went from a Slack channel where here's every question as it gets asked on the community to make it more accessible for staff, and now it's questions filtered by keywords in the title or the tag and things like that, which takes hundreds of questions a month into a curated list where I can get the expert on that product to take a look at it and take a look at it quickly and to validate something. So yeah, we could go all day on that. It sounds like yeah,
But alas,
that's my
we will not.
piece of advice. Yeah.
I love it. No, I think that that's definitely a great one. Thank you so much for sharing. As we come up towards the end of our conversation today, what are 3 B2B SaaS community trends that you're looking forward to and seeing in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah. So an evergreen one for me there is kind of the intersection of B2B or these kind of like niche micro communities that we talked about, right? The value of like being somebody within whatever ecosystem or community you're a part of. And a lot of times companies like us will, have a community platform like Inside It or Koros or Higher Logic or whatever, or you might take that to Slack, right? And so the intersection of what I call consumer grade communications and social platforms is really interesting because from that product management perspective, if people are spending X number of hours on LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, whatever, I think the reason so many communities are looking at Slack is because people are working in Slack, so then comfortable with it. They're bringing those expectations to you, right? So they're going to expect, I want a notification that tells me what's new from the last time that I was on there, right? You get that with LinkedIn, you get that with so many different places. And you can find yourself waiting for your community platform vendor. To my piece of advice of learn how to automate and extend through like APIs and things like that is, if you're just waiting for your vendor to deliver that feature, you might get impatient or you might feel some pressure there. And that for me comes from how are the applications, the messaging platforms, communication tools, and communities that your community members are involved with elsewhere. How do those work? Because they're going to bring those expectations to your community. And that's going to be a challenge. So keeping an eye on what are trends there, the features that they're rolling out, the types of behavior, right? That's probably the biggest one that's informed the last couple of years of my work, and that I'm always kind of monitoring because that evolves, right? A lot of interesting stuff is happening with Twitter right now, and a lot of Twitter competitors. And what features are they going to roll out over the last couple of years? Patreon, live streaming, things like Slack and Discord that allow people to create their own grassroots community platforms and things like that. Is if you want everyone in your community, there are other options for them. There are alternatives. So monitoring those so that you can keep up with those expectations and create the best party for people to go to. To that previous analogy is a big one. The second one is I'm in the B2B industry. Events has been a big part of my career. With the pandemic in the last couple of years, what's our next normal going to look like? Are people really looking for in-person stuff after maybe a lot less of that over the last couple of years? Or did they learn, hey, if I'm just listening to a presentation, I don't need to drive across the city or fly someplace else for that, right? So virtual and hybrid and in-person, like what are the trends of what our users are showing us that they want? And it might be, I suspect it's going to be different for each community too. And that's helpful to go back to the previous thing, your product management approach. What problem are you solving for people? And then what's the value of them showing up in person? Because everybody learned we can do things on Zoom or whatever platform. And so if there's not that value of attending in person, it might be harder to get people to show up than it previously did? Or what is the value that they're going to get? Is your session interactive? So monitoring that trend. And then I'm not on TikTok. I'm not a big TikTok user, but listen to podcasts that are just talking about how TikTok is disrupting media, social media, how big it is with younger generations. And to my first point of those consumer grade communications platforms and social platforms and people bringing those expectations, younger people are the most engaged right on TikTok, I believe. And as those people, a lot of those people are in the workforce already, but more of them will be joining the workforce year over year. So what does short form video mean? And things like that. So one thing I'm doing kind of along those lines is this idea of micro content and taking an hour long webinar video and chopping it up into the top 5 moments or whatever in individual clips, because to your earlier point, Joel, of meeting people where they are, is if you can make it easy for them to get that value of here's 5 minutes on that one point, and then you can always go back and watch the whole thing or whatever. That's going to help you win when their expectations are TikTok and shorter video and very creatively edited videos and then of course the memes are the best parts.
Very fair.
Yeah, that's my 3 things.
Awesome. I love it. I too am also not on TikTok, so I'm right there with you. I definitely think that those are all amazing trends. So thank you for sharing, Danny. And again, thank you so much for being on the Community-Led Growth Show. If people want to follow and or connect with you after listening or watching the episode online, what are the best channels and or handles for them to use to do so?
Yeah, I have a Twitter account with my name. I'm going to be pushing out work-related stuff for the most part. I'm not usually engaging in the community manager conversation there. So LinkedIn by far is the best. And if you want to email me, my first last name at Gmail or at Unqork is a good way to reach me. But also probably find me on LinkedIn is the best way.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great day.